In this video, I will show you how to easily connect and configure a Netgear ProAV switch for the first time. In many networks, we still don't have internet access or an established network, so I will in this first video show how to perform a basic configuration of the switch in such a scenario. That is, with a standalone switch in an isolated network. I start by connecting with a network cable to the switch and navigate to the IP address 169.254.100.100. As you can see, a web page opens in our browser. I haven't done any configuration on the switch or the computer. If we have a look at the IP address of this computer right now, we can see that its IP address is 169.254.227.173. That's a similar address to the one for the switch. To understand why both the computer and the switch got an IP address that are quite similar, we have to understand what a link local address is. A link local address is an IP address starting with 169.254 and then something dot something, with a subnet mask of 255.255.0.0. Any computer in the world will assign itself an IP address in this range if it tries to get an IP address from a DHCP server and there is no response. So this is how I could go to the web page of the switch without having to set up any IP address either on my computer or on the switch. The important thing here is that I don't connect my computer or switch to a network where there is a DHCP server, because then it will of course get an IP address from that server. So the Netgear switches, all of them in the ProAV line, will have an IP address of 169.254.100.100. And you can reach this switch using this IP address if you connect your computer directly to any of the normal ports on the switch. There is also another port that can be of interest, and that's the one marked with OOB, out of band. If you connect to that port instead, you can reach the switch on IP address 192.168.0.239. Of course, then you have to set a IP address on your computer first. So let's go back to our switch. This is our web page again. We have two login options here. One is the AV UI login. That's the simplified ProAV user interface that we can use. This will help us with most things that we will need in a ProAV installation. There is also the option to log into the main UI. That will take us to the normal Netgear interface. In this case, we're going to do a quick setup of this switch, so I'll just enter admin as the login name, and if I haven't logged in before, there is no password. I will have to set that in the next step here. And now I can log in with a newly set password. So this is the switch. I start at the menu overview and I can see the switch. This is a 48 port switch, 40 gigabit ports and 8 fiber ports. Can see some general information about the switch. I see that we have a default network with VLAN number 1 with the IP address that I just entered into the web browser. And I can see that all 48 ports have been assigned to this VLAN. In the Netgear ProAV switches, we use profiles for the VLANs. We'll come back to that in a moment. And down here we have some information about the switch, the temperature and the status of the fans. Okay, so let's go to network profiles. Here we can see the switch again, in the same way. All ports are marked in black here. That means that they are in the default profile. I will start by changing the color of the default ports to something else, just to be able to distinguish them from the other network that I will create in a moment. So let's press the color. I choose a blue color and press OK. If I want, I can also set up a DHCP server for this network here. I then enable first this option here and change from DHCP client to static, so I can set a static IP address of this switch. I then can enter, for example, 192.168.100.1, and if I want, I can then, if I do that, enable a DHCP server. I can choose the first IP address here. That will be in the lease for the clients requesting IP addresses, and if I want, I can enter a DNS server. If I press apply now, I will change the IP address of the switch for VLAN 1 to this IP address. I don't want that right now, since I would lose connection to it then. So I'll just turn this feature off again. And I press apply. It says success, and I can see that all the ports are now blue instead of black. This is a way to easily distinguish between different VLANs in the switch. So I will now add a new VLAN, and down here we have lots of profiles. So for example, I could set up a audio Dante network or a Crestron network or some other predefined profile. We can see here in the video profile, for example, that we have several different manufacturers' products in the same profile, so that would be suitable for those manufacturers. But let's add a Dante network here. I press the wheel over here. I then choose which ports should be members of this new VLAN. This is where I am connected right now. It's the number 3 with a green marking around it. So I won't add that into this VLAN, because then I would be in the new VLAN with a different IP address. I will then name this network, Dante network for example. I will assign it a number. The number will be between 1 and 4096, and it has to be unique in this environment. And I then choose a color for this network. In this network I also would like to have a IP address and a DHCP server. So I'll enter the information. Of course, I don't have internet access, so this DNS server will not do anything, but I'll add it anyway, and press apply. So we now see that we have two networks, the default one, the blue, and the purple one for Dante, with number 1 and number 10. I can see that 6 ports have been reassigned from the first network to the second one. And I can see in a visual representation that these 6 ports are now in the Dante network. Last thing I need to do is to save. And I'll do that by pressing the save button up here. And it says success. So this was how to configure the first things in a Netgear ProAV switch for a configuration with an isolated switch with no DHCP server in the network.